Hello and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, as always, Connor, and with me, for the first time ever, is Miguel Class. Miguel?
Hello.
This is not your first ever appearance. In fact, it feels even less like it because you and I have been talking about sumo every 2 months for the last, 8 months or so.
Yeah, which means that there's probably a good amount of people who are listening who have no idea who I am because they just totally skip all the sumo episodes on your Patreon.
They do pretty well, actually, as far as people seem to like them. And several people have commented that our Heavy Hanka series got them into sumo, and they appreciate it. As they should, because we just watched an Apex card last week, and let me tell you something. I would have rather been watching sumo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why are you guys so resistant to watching better combat sports? Yeah. What's your deal? You have like a battered wife syndrome with MMA. Like, you guys need to branch out.
Miguel is very kindly stepping in this week as Mr. Phil has fallen under the weather. So send your thoughts and your prayers in the direction of old Blighty this week.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad about that. As a listener of Heavy Hands, I would rather listen to you and Phil.
This is going to be a shit one to listen to for you.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I'm sad for him. I'd rather have him be here. I don't want anybody to feel like I'm trying to replace him or anything.
Yeah, me too. I just miss him, you know?
I tried to give you a little bit of that awkward silence, just
yeah, that's good. That's
just in honor of him.
That's nice. That gave me a nice little hit of nostalgia there. Oh, I remember when I recorded with Phil last week and I said something I thought was funny and then he said absolutely nothing for 5 full seconds.
It's just part of the experience now.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel. It is a little disconcerting that your mic quality is considerably better than his.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know, maybe that's just because I'm recording other things all the time, so I bought a decent mic. I don't know. Maybe that will endear me to some people.
Yeah. Well, I think that your sensibility and your analytical skill will be the thing that endears you to people, Miguel. And
maybe not for this card, though, because I'm kind of like not... I'm not like loving a lot of these fights.
Just be glad you didn't have to come in and talk about last week's card, all right, buddy? It could be.
You know what, though?
Worse.
There's a different thing when it's like a shitty Apex card and it's going to be bad. And then when it reaches a certain level of bad, you can laugh about it. And it's like fun.
Yeah.
But then there's like a pay-per-view card where you're kind of like, actually, this is when it's supposed to be good. And then you kind of, I've been waiting around for a month for some actual decent fights. And then you look at it and you're like, actually, I'm not super pumped about any of these.
Well, on that inspiring note, why don't we get into the subject at hand? We are, of course, alluding to UFC 314, the next pay-per-view, which is coming up this weekend. And those uninspiring fights that Miguel was talking about, well, in the main event, we have Alexander Volkanovski fighting once more for the now vacant UFC featherweight title against Diego Lopes. In the co-main event, we have Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. And after that, we have Bryce Mitchell versus Jean Silva. Those are two different kinds of horrifically funny fights to me. We also have Yair Rodriguez as the UFC debut opponent for multiple-time former Bellator champion Patricio Pitbull. And they're bringing Pitbull in. They signed a deal with Kyoji Horiguchi. It's like, how quickly can the UFC just become Strikeforce? Where they're like bringing in anyone else with any kind of profile, but like honestly way too late in their careers for it to be all as exciting as it should have been.
Yeah, this is like the exact opposite of what they really should be doing. It's like they should have held on to people like Horiguchi and even random mid-level people like Phil Davis or something like that. They should be desperately trying to keep their middle class of fighters around because it really makes a big difference for both giving fighters an actual pathway up the rankings, so you don't just have the Steve Erceg, like, oh, I went from fighting this guy to jumping right into the title kind of a thing. And then also just because it it actually does help fill out these lesser cards, because whether those people are mid-level or not, people will become fans of them, and then they will tune in to watch. You're always going to have a few guys that are not going to be great, but are good enough, and maybe hang around in the top 15, but are never going to be champion. But those guys can create actual fan bases and make these cards better. And instead, it's just like they just let them go elsewhere as soon as they start making too much money, and then replace them with all these Contender Series guys who are just
and
dreadful.
The Contender Series guys are getting worse than ever as well.
Oh,
they're
signing
dreadful.
They're very bad.
Fucking everyone, and they all suck. And like not even one of them on a week's card turns out to be somebody that seems to have any future in the UFC. Yeah, I believe the analogy I used when discussing this very idea with Zane last week is that filler can be a good thing in a context of like a fight card, right? There's a lot of good meals, a lot of delicious ethnic cuisines with a particular kind of filler, right? Like rice in like an Indian dish is like a filler. It's there to put your sauce and your protein and whatever on top of, and it's good. It adds something. Or you got like breadcrumbs in a meatloaf. Like people didn't start doing that because they didn't want to eat more meat. It's because they didn't have it. They needed that filler. And then there's people who like, got their hand chopped off in 13th century England for making a loaf of bread that's half sawdust. And that's the kind of filler we're dealing with now in the UFC is non-nutritious filler, unfortunately.
It makes me think like of the one card I went to live was UFC 218 in Detroit, and it's that's the one that was headlined by Aldo versus Holloway 2, and it had Ngannou's knockout of Overeem, and had Eddie Alvarez versus Justin Gaethje. So that's the main course, like all this amazing stuff, like really top level guys in their prime fighting each other, and really relevant matchups. And then like on the undercard, you have like some really interesting guys coming, like Dominic Reyes as a prospect, getting a winnable fight. And then you have like you remember David Tamer, and he was fighting Drakkar Close. That's like a good filler type of a fight. It was a funny one. And then you have like Yancy Medeiros versus Alex Oliveira, which was just an absolute like war, and Paul Felder versus Charles Oliveira. You have like those things, which at the time, none of those are super relevant fights, but actually were, like when you were watching live, they're awesome, and they built hype for the main card, and then you can have your main dish.
I'm just going to look here at the last card that I went to. Boy, it's been a while. It was UFC 203 in Cleveland. Miocic versus Overeem. It had the hysterical matchup between Verdum and Travis Brown in the co-main event slot. What a fight that was to see live. To see Verdum trying to fucking mule kick Edmund Taverdian afterwards. Mickey Gall, CM Punk. Okay.
Oh man.
we had Jimmy Rivera, Uriah Faber.
Okay.
We had oh god, it was actually kind of thin. Fuck.
Actually, this doesn't fit the narrative at all. This card sucks.
Yeah. I did get to see Matt Brown versus Eric Silva here in Cincinnati. That was possibly the best hometown fighter fight to see ever.
What? No, that's my hometown. He's from Columbus.
He's from Middletown. He's from like smack between the two.
Yeah, but he lived here for a while.
He lived here too, motherfucker.
No.
They used to read him out as Cincinnati, Ohio as his hometown because nobody knows what Middletown is.
All right. We'll call it.
Listen.
Agree to disagree.
You can't take Matt Brown from us. It's all we've got.
Yeah.
I guess we had Rich Franklin too.
He actually trained here at Westside Barbell for a long time though. And was hanging out with Mark Coleman and all that stuff. So, and we don't have anybody else. Like our fight history sucks in Columbus compared to Cincinnati. You guys have fucking Ezra Charles.
That's true. All right. Well, let's get into this main event, before we get even further off topic. Alexander Volkanovski, Diego Lopes. All of this is happening because Ilia Topuria decided to change weight classes and abdicated the title, which is a strange move. A lot of people, have you heard people, rumorizing that he like popped a drug test and they wanted to hide it or something? It's always fun.
Yeah, I have not seen that, but I don't care.
Oh, no. It's always fun conspiracies when something like this happens, though. It does seem strange. Like, is the UFC done with allowing champs to try for 2 titles at once now? Are they finally done with that? Or did he just decide he wanted to be a lightweight? Who knows?
I think I get the impression he wanted to be a lightweight because of the way he was trying to fight at lightweight and pick fights with lightweights all throughout when he was a featherweight.
Certainly.
It might be something just the weight cut is harder than we think it would be for him given his stature, but or just that he views it as like the money division. There's more attention there, even though featherweight is the GOAT division.
Yeah. Well, he's just still gunning for that Paddy Pimblett matchup is what this really tells us.
Yeah, we might get it after this.
You know, if all this, I just realized I have a reason to pray that Paddy Pimblett beats Michael Chandler because, yeah, that would be a delight. Instead, we've got former champ Volkanovski taking on Diego Lopes, who I gotta say, Miguel, just feels like a distinct artifact of the Dricus era to me.
Yeah, he sucks.
I'm just, and he keeps winning. And I keep being like, I know this guy ain't that good. And then he keeps winning and making me look like a fool, but I just can't let go of what my eyes are telling me, which is that this is not an elite MMA game that Diego Lopes is playing. And that,
yeah, definitely not.
He is, I think, by a lot of metrics, an elite MMA athlete, which probably explains some of the difference there. He's a big featherweight. He's powerful, you know, and you can't question the fact that the man has some dynamite grappling skills. But it just doesn't feel like an elite MMA game to me. And so I'm kind of going into this with the disconcerting feeling, I gotta say, that this should be a pretty straightforward win for Volkanovski.
Yeah, this is why this fight sucks and why I was kind of down on this card at the top. Is just that as an analyst, if you want to call me that or call us that, this is like the worst fight to try and break down because it's essentially like, yeah, Volkanovski is better in pretty much every conceivable way. If he's in his, not even in his prime, if he has any like semblance of what he was when he was at his peak just a couple of fights ago, or honestly, even if he fights exactly the same way he did against Topuria in his last fight, this should be a very, very easy fight. But then that just means that you have to sit around and expect that all these other intangibles like age, wear and tear, his chin, and things like that are going to be what really determines the fight. And it's really hard to do anything with that as an analyst because you just kind of have to be like, Volkanovski is better. I can outline all the ways that he is better. It seems pretty obvious. He has a way more comprehensive game, and that's not just in terms of like how many different things he can do, but in the depth of each of those individual skills as well. But then you're just like, yeah, he still might just lose.
Yep. Might have just gotten old, you know, and it's hard to evaluate that based on, you know, the level of opponent that he has lost to in his last 2 losses. They are pretty clearly 2 of the very best, if not the 2 best fighters in MMA right now.
Right.
In Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria. But yeah, I fully co-sign that. The troubling thing is that, and we're going to talk about it, all the ways that Volkanovski should be able to simply outclass a messy bruiser like Diego Lopes. And there's still that possibility that, like, you know, he overextends on a bad shot and just gets hit on the counter. And that's it.
Yeah. So I guess since people are generally going to be a lot more familiar with Volkanovski's game, and since we both talked a lot more about him than we have about Diego Lopes, it probably makes sense to just kind of outline, I guess, what we're seeing and why we don't love Lopes. And I think this is something that people, at least if you see on Twitter, a lot more people are going to be excited about Lopes.
Oh, yeah.
And he's exactly the kind of fighter that the UFC likes because he looks great in clips that you can post on Twitter.
Absolutely.
He's an he's kind of like this MMA native. I don't know if he actually is that, but he kind of does all things very aggressively and puts together really cool sequences of offense that if you strung them together in a highlight, you'd be like, wow, this fighter's amazing. He's dangerous everywhere. He's got this venomous guard. He is really dangerous in the pocket. He's great in transition. But then it's just, for us, we have to sit back and then be like, okay, like, let's see how he pieces those together over the course of a 3-round fight. And then you're like, oh, he doesn't. There is no process there. He just has no real idea of how to guide a fight. He has no real idea of space in the cage, cagecraft that is. He has no real way of leading his opponent into what he wants them to do or taking away weapons from his opponent. He just kind of sits around and waits for some opportunity to do something dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, that is the kind of thing that will work a lot of time, especially if, like Diego Lopes, you're big and powerful and generally fearless.
Yeah, and I guess to contrast him a little bit with DDP, he's not as terrible technically.
Certainly not. No, he's a featherweight.
Especially as a puncher, right? So if you see Diego Lopes throw a left hook, throw a right uppercut to the body, do those things, he's not going to look like DDP for most of the time. So that, it is featherweight instead of middleweight. So there's a big difference there. And obviously in his grappling as well, he has some legitimately great skills.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying when I say he feels like another artifact of the DDP era.
Yeah, right? For sure. Yeah.
There's just a lot of fighters at the top of the UFC right now where I'm like, is he good? I can't tell because he's winning, but it doesn't look good to me. This is not what I expect a high-level fighter to look like.
Which means we should definitely expect him to win.
Yeah.
I mean, given what we've seen over and over again.
It is
now.
the Dricus
you
era.
Look at the stack of champions, and you just be like, you probably didn't think most of these guys would, outside of Islam, obviously.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think a lot of these guys would be champion. Even somebody that you like Bilal, you wouldn't think that he was good enough to be champion. And he is actually good. I guess throwback to the Pat Wyman argument. He is actually good.
He is actually good. Yeah, but he's definitely not great in the way that past welterweight champions have been, right?
Yes, for sure.
And then that's the thing with Lopes. He does at least have that side of things, which I guess Dricus shares, but it comes through a lot more clearly from Lopes. The athleticism is there. And frequently these things matter a lot more than technique. And I do think there will be opportunities for those things to matter, even against Volkanovski, because Volkanovski is generally an excellent game planner. He is a very principled fighter, I would say. But there are still plenty of little technical issues in the way that he conducts himself, like we saw against Topuria. Essentially going out like Steve Erceg did against Kai Kara France against Topuria, just relying way too much on a, punishable type of defensive movement and getting caught out for it. Like, these things are there, so as much as it's easy to think of Volkanovski as a guy who is tuning up Max Holloway off the back foot. It took the man 2 fights with Max Holloway to get to that level of proficiency, and he just may not have the same margins anymore that he had at that time.
And really, even in his prime, he was, getting dropped relatively frequently for a fighter in his prime.
Yep.
He's never had an amazing chin. He's always been great at recovering. And it's just kind of got worse as he's fought in bigger people like Islam or harder punchers like Topuria, or just better punchers, I should say. And, but even Holloway dropping him a few times in their second fight is definitely something that we've always been concerned with Volk or Chad Mendez hurting him.
Yeah.
And somebody like Diego Lopes, like you mentioned, is gigantic. He's probably similarly sized to Islam. He's noticeably not as big. Islam is gigantic for sure, but he's probably about as tall as him, at least.
Yeah.
And I think probably more concerning is that some of those issues that Volkanovski has defensively are specifically in the pocket and in some of these messy transitions. So, for example, the knockout against Topuria, he got blasted out trying to reach out for a collar tie when Topuria was swarming him. That's not inherently a bad move. Like, you should try and clinch with people as a means to relieve pressure. That's not terrible. But Topuria read him on that as he was doing it earlier and came over the top of the right hand. And Diego Lopes is quite good from like collar tie positions. He's got awkward punches when he can get his hands on you. And so if you kind of stand in that range with him, like I said earlier, his hooks are pretty dangerous, and that's probably his best punches are like his left hook probably, and
he's got a
maybe
good counter right hand too.
The body.
Yeah,
counter right hand too can come over top of the jab or a collar tie like that. So he's definitely like, if he knocks out Volk, it's not going to just be because he got a lucky punch. Probably it will also be because Volk made some mistake defensively, most likely.
Yeah, and because Lopes is genuinely dangerous there. Like, you can critique the process, which is connecting, or rather like not connecting all of these things, but it's not like his execution is terrible when he gets his moments, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He slips and fires a nice straight right hand. Like, you can't hate that much.
And the nature of MMA fights is, especially over 5 rounds, is that those moments do come even if you're not actively creating them. And especially early on in fights. Yeah. It's just, fights are messy and things end up getting a little weird, and it's very hard to control every exchange in a favorable way. Yeah. Especially when, like we mentioned with Volkanovski, he's so technically good in a lot of different places, but he's not Aldo defensively or something like that. Right. He can't exactly control a fight the way a prime Aldo did, especially because Aldo had a leg up in terms of athleticism and durability and things like that as well.
Yeah. So what are we expecting to see from Volkanovski then? What's this obvious game plan that we keep alluding to? I mean, I think first things first, you look at a guy like Diego Lopes, you think, this man can be fed a steady diet of jabs. Yeah. This man is going to sort of stand there relatively squared up, waiting for you to do something big and stupid to counter. He mostly waits to counter in the striking, and just, it's very old school MMA, right? Like, just do nothing to set anything up, but when the guy steps in, you're ready to meet him, and you throw as hard as you possibly can, and you throw 3 or 4 punches.
It's kind of like you're expecting your opponent to consent to, we're going to find out who the best is, and we're going to eventually test all of our skills and go everywhere. And, you heard a lot of this from fighters back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, when you would ask them like what their game plan is, and they would just say, I don't know, wherever the fight goes, I'm going to be better than him everywhere. Yeah. That's like the mentality. Like, I'm just going to go and stand there, and then like wherever the fight goes, I'm going to be good.
Yeah. The game plan is step 1, stand there. Step 2, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 3, win.
Sort of. Yeah.
So yeah, like, this should be one of those fights, and I suspect this is very likely to be the approach that Volkanovski will take, where he should be able to just get a lot of work done kind of positionally on the feet, right?
Yeah.
Do a trite of damage, kick the legs, kick the body, land lots of jabs, make Lopes turn as often as possible, make him reset his feet constantly. And, are there going to be opportunities for some kind of counter leading into like a bum rush off of those moments? Yes. And I am worried about that. But it also just seems like at a certain point, Lopes has got to have somebody show him how unstructured his striking game actually is.
Yeah. I mean, I do think the jab is huge. And if you look back in Volkanovski's last fight against Topuria, he was actually getting a lot done with his jab early. His jab looked pretty much as good as ever. And Volkanovski is one of the few fighters that can actually move and strike. and can actually pivot with his jab and can present threats. He can kick and move as well. Like his low kicks would probably be an important thing here. He's got not only a really fast jab, but he's got unusually long arms and these are the things he did to keep a lid on Max Holloway for 5 rounds. Mm-hmm. And you have to imagine that there's really nothing stopping him from doing that here, other than the fact that Lopes is a much harder puncher and a much more dangerous in singular moments than somebody like Holloway was.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, and the matchup is in my mind a little bit more analogous to the fight with Ortega, right? So it's like Ortega's a little bit more structureless compared to other fighters, more dangerous in singular moments. And we saw in that fight that Volkanovski definitely got put in some dangerous moments, like that sequence where he got trapped in a guillotine and almost got finished came because he was kicking too close and got hit. And essentially it's a little bit of a trip and a knockdown at the same time. And then, Ortega jumps on the neck, and that is something that could easily repeat itself here. Like I said, it will not just be because Volkanovski gets caught. It will be because he makes some sort of mistake, throwing a kick from too close.
He makes plenty. He makes plenty of mistakes, and it's just featherweight is one of those divisions where you really do need to be able to survive those mistakes because they're going to happen. Yeah. People in this division are too good. And that includes Diego Lopes. However much I may not like the absence of structure that there seems to be in his game. Like I said, a technique matters sometimes, and you can bet I will be there to point out when technique matters.
Right, yeah.
But it's not the only thing.
Yep.
And in every other respect, Diego Lopes is an elite featherweight. And so yeah, I am going to pick Volkanovski here. But it's just worth remembering that how many fights have there really been in Volkanovski's career where he just sort of kept the lid on his opponent for the entirety of the fight? And it's like Max Holloway 3, and I think he benefited from the 50 minutes he had spent in the cage with Max Holloway before then to figure out how to so expertly read and punish his jabs and thereby prevent him from building any momentum at all. There's an old Chan Sung Jung, who he was just way faster than, and also a much better boxer at that point. And that's kind of it.
Yeah, and Aldo, if you want to consider just, basically shutting him down like a lot of people have shut down Aldo in this part of his career.
And maybe he'll try to do that to Diego Lopes, just hold him against the cage.
Well, that is the thing though, is that Volkanovski is so skilled that, we expect him to come out and box and to use his jab. That's what probably makes the most sense. But he could also move forward on Diego Lopes. Somebody like Diego Lopes surely is a lot worse moving backwards than he is when he's allowed to just plant in the middle of the cage. Volkanovski can also just take him down, and Lopes is pretty happy to try and play guard, and
maybe he's looking at that.
Volkanovski is a monster from top position, and so maybe Volkanovski will just take him down. Evloev had a lot of success doing that.
I was going to say, maybe he looked at that Evloev fight and was like, shit, I can defend submissions.
Yeah, he did that to Yair Rodriguez, he just was like, I can just take this down. And Yair Rodriguez similarly, happy to play guard, and when somebody is willing, and Ortega too, but anybody that I think, even though those people have dangerous guards, Rodriguez to some extent, but especially Ortega, that doesn't mean that somebody like Volkanovski can't just feel confident to get on top of them and pound them out, because he had an entire early career where that was his entire style. Yeah,
that was all he was doing. I suppose we could take a little heart as obvious Volkanovski fans from that Yair Rodriguez fight. It was 2 years ago now, but it is also a fight where the intangible elements, the weird X factor elements are the things that make it feel very scary for a consummate professional like Volkanovski. And then he goes in there and there's a couple of hiccups. You don't love every decision he makes, but he's got a pretty good idea of how to crush this guy while also best avoiding the danger spots.
Yeah, but even in that fight, like Yair actually had to make at least some adjustments.
Yeah.
And, he was focusing a lot on his kicks and decided to, he realized he was only going to actually land on Volkanovski when he put his kicks and punches together and started finding success there. I think it was the third round. He took a big headbutt from Volk, which people have made a lot of. But in general, the thing is that even in those instances and Ortega too, found success in the fifth round against Volkanovski, and opponents have been able to make turns in fights against Volkanovski, but generally he is the best adjuster that we've ever seen. So he will find a way. And the only reason he hasn't even had this chance in his last couple fights is he just got deaded early,
Yeah. By again, probably the two best fighters in MMA today.
Yeah. And both of those guys actually had to have a very clever approach to do that, and had to,
right.
We talked about Topuria, like he actually had to cut him off. He had to pressure him. He had to start slipping jabs, and then he had to pick his spots to blitz in. He had to attack Volk's movement with his own low kicks. There's a lot that he had to do.
Yeah, all that time that
point.
Volkanovski was kind of out jabbing him and moving around him, Topuria was gathering very useful data and
landing his own jab.
Yeah, and Topuria, like Volkanovski, is also a great adjuster. In fact, Volkanovski might be a better adjuster than he is a game planner.
Yes, I would agree with that too. And Topuria, it's hard because I think he's a very good game planner, and then he's also a very good tactical adjuster, which is something that I think can have that kind of success against Volkanovski, because we've talked about he has those.
He's going to give you the same openings defensively again and again, isn't he? They're just kind of hardwired into his technique at this point.
Yeah. And that might be Lopes. I don't think it is. I think Lopes is somebody that generally has looked worse as fights have gone on. It's more often his opponents figuring him out than it is him figuring his opponents out.
Agreed. It's hard not to notice that most of his really impressive wins happen really very quickly. And most of the wins that don't happen really quickly, he ends the fight not looking very good.
Yeah, I mean, the Dan Ige one is...
Yeah.
You would not expect after watching that this guy was going to be fighting for a title,
right?
In a year or whatever,
right? So I'm expecting a somewhat hairy first round, and I'm expecting that Lopes, being a tough, inherently fierce guy, may make something scary happen at any point in the middle of the fight. But I am expecting these to be mostly isolated moments. And if we simply make the assumption, which is a bigger assumption than it would have once been, that Volkanovski can survive those moments, there just seem to be a lot of ways for an expert fight controller like Volkanovski to gain control of this matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And specifically, like, he can, Lopes, that is, can find dynamic moments of offense. But it took Topuria and Islam deading him with one shot, because even in the first Makhachev fight, that he hurt him a handful of times and wasn't able to finish Volkanovski. Right. And we mentioned that before in Volkanovski's past fights. So, I mean, if his chin is gone, but it's not like the punches that he got hit with wouldn't maybe have deaded him all the time from those positions.
Fucking full-on flush head kick and then a Topuria right hand clean on the chin. Like, these are considerable punches.
Yeah, and Lopes is a hard puncher, and he has gotten a few finishes like that. But you see, like in the Ige fight and in the Ortega fight, where he starts getting a moment of offense and goes for a finish, he often ends up in grappling situations where he's trying to finish somebody on the mat. And I definitely trust Volk to be able to survive those pretty well. Not that, I mean, he could definitely get submitted.
It's possible that is the one thing we have definitely not seen yet. In fact, Volkanovski has a pretty bulletproof record against grapplers up to this point.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess all that to say, I think Lopes kind of needs to actually just straight up knock him out, or or swarm him. And you just really don't know where he's at, Volkanovski, at this point in his career. So things can change, and, he's coming off 2 knockout losses, so maybe it takes less. And sometimes fighters do get hit and don't recover. And
psychologically too, he's actually been quite open about, his mental state following these rough results. Like, yeah, it's just that is the disappointing thing on some level about matchups like this. It's like, there's no other time in history where I would have had as hard a time picking Volkanovski here.
Yeah, for
2 years ago, this discussion would have been over in 15 minutes. So
I mean, but I guess the long story short is, like, seeing Ortega 1-1-2 Lopez over and over again, even in the last couple of rounds when he looked dreadful, slow, terrible, really had already gotten hurt really bad. It really just feels like, unless the durability doesn't hold up, Volkanovski should have his way with this fight.
Take a round, land those jabs, get some reads. You will have mostly figured out his timing by that point, and then it should hopefully be relatively smooth sailing, but we will see. All right, I think that's enough on the main event. We're going to take a break here, and when we return, the co-main event, folks, it's Michael Chandler, everybody's favorite All-American, versus Paddy Pimblett, apparently everybody's favorite Englishman, which thank God Phil isn't here to hear that, because that would have been a real blow to the ego to have that confirmed. All right, we'll be back with Chandler Pimblett after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about the co-main event of UFC 314 now. It is Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. And we may have lambasted some of the UFC's matchmaking choices, not only on this card, but even more so on other recent cards. But I think it would be a mistake not to acknowledge that a minor miracle has in fact been performed here. The UFC has found a matchup for Paddy Pimblett, which I dearly hope he wins.
Oh no, really?
That's not nothing, you know?
You actually hate Chandler more than Paddy Pimblett, or you just think?
Oh yeah, of course. You don't. Paddy Pimblett's just out here. He's a carrion bird, you know. He's just eating, he's eating old.
That's true.
Used up fighters no one's going to use anyway. If Michael Chandler keeps getting fucking shots against great fighters, even though he's A, not very good, B, an unlikable phony.
Yeah, I think though, having, like, Chandler's given me enough, like, good fights throughout his career, and I've seen enough cool things out of him, and he has enough things about him as a fighter that make him sort of decent, and has been, that I guess I'm, like, more appreciative of him, even though he's terrible, and he's obviously a super dirty fighter.
Dirty, and grimy motherfucker.
Yeah, there's so many things you could be said about. I wouldn't say I like him or I'm a fan of him or anything like that, but compared to Paddy Pimblett, who is abysmal, like really bad, a really bad fighter, I just don't like to see really bad fighters continue to do well. Like, I don't think it would suck to see Pimblett in the top 10, and it makes no sense that Chandler's there either. So I'm mad at both of them.
Would it suck though? Because here's the thing: if Paddy Pimblett really is as bad as we suspect, then it would be funny to see him in the top 10. Part of the problem
this is lightweight. It's like supposed to be one of the best divisions ever. I'd rather not, you know what I mean? Because the problem is their rankings. Like, if he gets a ranking, he will just be perpetually ranked forever as long as he fights other ranked fighters. So, and it will screw up things for like, legitimately fighters who, I don't know. I just get mad because there are guys who were good lightweights who, kind of never got their shots like this, or never got built up in a way that was appropriate like this, and just got mashed together in difficult matchups. Maybe somebody like Demiris Magulov or something like that would have benefited from a more measured
Paddy Pimblett matchmaking. You know what? Yeah. I gotta hand this to Paddy, like, just as I hand it to guys like Ian Gary, all the most annoying guys, especially all the most annoying guys from the British Isles, it turns out. I don't think you can wholly blame the UFC for their matchmaking. It's like, why is the UFC giving these guys a sweetheart deal? I think these are two of the genuinely most business savvy fighters in the UFC who are actually, cultivating the kind of matchups they get. They're curating their matchups, rather.
Yeah, you're right. It probably is more that because we were kind of talking a little bit before we started recording about just how thoughtless the UFC is with their matchmaking. So probably isn't that they have actually decided to build up a prospect, because I don't know that they know how to do that at all, given some of the matches that they make, even when they are trying to build up prospects. Yeah, it seems like they have no clue how to do that. So it is probably more so that he and his manager or whoever have a better idea about that and are guiding things. Yeah. Which, to your point, like, you can't be mad at that. That's how it really should be done.
Yeah. And the disappointing thing about Paddy Pimblett is that he doesn't look very good, and he keeps beating old fighters that we like. But what I have to say about, you said before, if he gets a ranking, he'll just be ranked forever, as long as he keeps fighting ranked fighters.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the part where I'm like, well, is he then? Do we think Paddy Pimblett's going to continue getting wins if he's fighting exclusively ranked fighters?
But that's what I mean. You don't have to win. You can lose, like, if you, like, this is Chandler, right? Like, Chandler has barely won.
That's true.
But as long as you lose to other ranked fighters, you don't drop in the rankings. The only way that you lose is if somebody without a ranking jumps up ahead of you and pushes you down, basically. And enough people, so if the guys in the top 15 only ever fight each other, then essentially nobody else breaks in. It's just like the way that they do rankings.
Let me look at the UFC rankings right now, out of curiosity. Lightweight, Michael Chandler is ranked number 7.
Yeah, exactly.
He hasn't, let's see, let's just give this record a once over. Beat Tony Ferguson in 2022, so his wins are commensurate with those of Paddy Pimblett. Otherwise, he is 4-1 in his last 5. But they have all been to ranked fighters. Think of how it was with like Rosenstrike or somebody like that at before he got cut or something like that, who just perpetually hangs out in the rankings forever. Or it's like that over and over again. And the way the UFC does rank, like Colby Covington was hanging out. Yeah. He's still, I would bet you he's still a top 10 fighter. Let's find out. He's number 9.
He's number 9.
He's number 9. He looks like the 30th best fighter at best in the current UFC welterweight division, but he's number 9.
This is my point. So if Paddy Pimblett gets this, like, getting this opportunity, if he wins, you will just have Colby Covington again, You always be like, well, he's just going to get beat up all these people or whatever, and then it just won't be the case. And
I still think I would enjoy that. I think I'm capable of getting something out of that, Miguel. Paddy Pimblett now being cursed to only fight fellow ranked fighters, and he can't ever escape because his ranking will never go away. They can't justify giving him, some fucking bum. They got to keep giving him ranked fighters, and he just can't beat them. That has its own kind of appeal.
I guess. I don't know. For me, it's hard for me to get excited about a fight when my only motivation is to see one fighter lose. Like, and we'll talk about that maybe later if we talk about Bryce Mitchell. Like, I would rather just not see these guys at all. Like, I don't want to see them fight at all, rather than seeing them, like, rooting against them. I don't like rooting against people. I like fights where I can root for people or be happy with either, or just look for skill or technique and development. I don't like watching fights to watch just for somebody to lose,
Yeah. Well, that's the new name for our duo then. The purist and the pervert.
Yeah.
You're like, this isn't this supposed to be a sport? And I'm like, look at that asshole. You know?
Yeah.
2 ways of appreciating the beautiful sport of mixed martial arts. Well, let's talk about this matchup. Michael Chandler, Paddy Pimblett. I mean, first things first, given all that I just said, it does seem very likely that Michael Chandler is a little bit too big of a morsel for Paddy Pimblett. Simply physically.
Yeah.
Michael Chandler has a horribly messy game. He's had a couple moments in his career where he seems to come up with like some good game plan or whatever, but they never seem particularly durable. They tend to break down pretty quickly into the fight, even on those nights. And I think if anything, he has just leaned into being American action man and doesn't really try to fight good the way that he used to. He just goes out there
that's
hammer and tongs.
For sure. He used to be a somewhat clever fighter. I guess just as an overall summary, and if you want a more detailed breakdown on Chandler, Ryan Wagner a while ago did like a 20-minute video on him. But
oh my God.
Essentially, I know, which is like, why would he ever do that?
Talk about a pervert. Jesus.
Yeah. But essentially Chandler, like he fights out of a very wide bladed stance, which of course makes it better for him to blitz, linearly, like forward and backward.
Karate
and then
moves.
He pairs that with jabs and dipping jabs. And then he's mostly just trying to disguise and set up a big right hand.
Yeah.
The problem with the stance is it makes it really hard to move laterally when you are that, wide stance and when you're that bouncy, that sort of, it's similar to like the problem that karate blitzer guys have.
Yeah. Especially if you do not also know how to pivot.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the main thing. You
can get away with it like Stephen Thompson if you also have some boxing skills to kind of augment that. But
yeah,
we see a lot of karate guys.
Whitaker too, to some extent. You know?
Totally.
And Horiguchi, the guys who are actually good at that style. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that where Chandler does his best work really is when he can, and he wants to fight in burst and then blitz people to the fence. And he can do a lot of good work there, but when you can't move laterally, it's very hard to cut off the cage and keep people against the fence. Mm-hmm. And so you see a lot, even in his earlier fights, where there's a lot of him just blitzing at people and them circling away. And he can still try, and then he has to try and leap into something to cut them off, which can work occasionally because he's just that athletic. But all of those things, when you get old and even as an A+ athlete as he is, things start to diminish and it starts to fall apart a little bit more. And then he kind of just probably can't do that for as many minutes in the fight as he used to because of very energy intensive style. Mm-hmm. And then over time, he just kind of, settles into, I'm just going to will wins into existence by just throwing as hard as I can and trying to blast people. Or like he did against Oliveira in the last fight, just waiting to do that until the end, I guess.
Yeah, Yoel Romero style.
Yeah.
Paddy Pimblett was his striking style, on the other hand, was famously compared by our friend Phil to that video clip of the guy popping out of the trash can and getting decked and then the lid slamming shut on his head.
Yeah.
I think he has gotten a bit more considerate with his striking over these last few fights, which is to say, at least he's more willing to be patient. I wouldn't say that he's doing he's doing a lot of work in those lulls, but those lulls do make him safer on the feet. Make it more likely that
I think in that sense
will
he
make
realized,
mistake,
like
right?
in the Bobby Green fight where
he
just doesn't do anything too drastically bad is the main point. And he knows that where his bread is buttered, really, like he knows his advantage in the grappling department and he doesn't rush it. And he looks absolutely terrible when he does blitz into punches.
Oh, God.
Like I think it wasn't his UFC debut where, they were making a big scene out of how he just runs forward and knocks somebody out. I don't even remember who it was, and then you just watch it and you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. It
was Luigi Vendramini. How could you forget that?
I know. Hey, he has a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, apparently. I'll have to trawl through that one later just to, sometimes it's nice to just get some lore on a fascinating figure like Luigi Vendramini. So yeah.
Italian stallion.
Pimblett has done what a lot of MMA fighters do, which is to sort of improve negatively. Like, he's making fewer outright mistakes, which, you know, is still a good thing in a way.
When you suck at doing things.
Yeah, right. When everything you do is a mistake,
just
then
don't do them.
Doing less is a great way to avoid those screw ups. However, if he were to take that kind of approach to Michael Chandler, and it doesn't seem like another approach is going to work particularly well for him, like until we get like a crazy scramble on the ground or something, right?
Right.
Then he has a real chance. But if he's going to hang back and be patient against Chandler, is that a good idea?
No, definitely not. That's the worst idea.
Chandler loves to crush people in the first round. He comes out like a house on fire. And Paddy Pimblett still has no defense.
Yep. And as dreadful as he looks coming forward, he's even worse moving backward.
Oh, yeah.
And has no lateral movement at all, so Chandler won't run into the issue that he has in the past with other fighters.
Yeah. However, Michael Chandler is not actually very good anymore.
He's also an idiot.
He's an idiot, too. And this is the other thing I wanted to get into. Like, this has been on my mind quite a lot lately, trying to get inside the head of an MMA fighter more than I have in the past, right? And like, for example, this came up with Zane last week when we were talking about the Murphy-Emmett fight. And we were like, well, he took a huge step back. He made such stupid decisions against Dan Ige. So he might fight like an idiot against Josh Emmett. And then I said, hold on a minute. I'm accessing my MMA fighter brain right now, which is actually a sort of a clump of nerves near the hip, which serves as a brain for the average MMA fighter, much like a Stegosaurus.
And that's why DDP does so well, because he just headbutts people. MMA brain.
Yeah, most of these guys have a Stegosaurus brain. DDP, it's a Triceratops brain. But I look at Josh Emmett and I think, okay, I'm an MMA fighter. I don't know what's going on. I'm confused. I wake up scared every day. Am I going to look at Josh Emmett and think, I can bully this guy. This guy's a pushover. And the answer is just no. Mm-hmm. It would be not just stupid, but uncharacteristic for any MMA fighter, including Murphy himself, to do to a guy like Emmett what he tried unsuccessfully to do to Ige. Whereas even though it's blatant to us that it was a bad idea to lunge after Dan Ige throwing the ugliest punches ever, I get why an MMA fighter would do that. You're like, this guy's small, he's not intimidating, he's waiting around too much. There's like some libidinal impulse that tells you it's okay to make mistakes against this guy, but Josh Emmett, I know he's scary. And this also came up the last time that we discussed Bobby Green and how he approached Paddy Pimblett and seemed absolutely petrified of his grappling game, to the extent that he made some horrible grappling mistakes and basically fulfilled his own prophecy. Paddy Pimblett is a fighter with profile. He has a reputation. This means a lot in the mind of an MMA fighter. And Michael Chandler might be scared of him. That's the crazy thing, right? He might convince himself, this guy keeps getting wins. I'm an MMA fighter. I can't tell when somebody's too old. I'm too old, and I can't admit that. So I can't tell when the wins are just because he's fighting fighters who should be retired. He's a scary grappler. He's big. There is a non-zero chance that Michael Chandler is on some level like intimidated by Paddy Pimblett, which is very funny to think about.
Yeah, it's really hard to get in the brain of MMA fighters, but you're right. It's like you could definitely see Chandler being like, wow, did you see how he like completely shut out Ferguson? Like, yeah. I know Ferguson is a tough fighter, you know. And
this guy's Makachev.
I had to fight Ferguson, and Ferguson hurt me a few times, and you know, he must have a really good chin. He must, you know, have a good gas tank. I don't know. It's just like a lot of fighters don't do tape study.
Yeah, they just go on vibes.
And you're right. That's exactly perfect.
The vibe in the UFC world right now is that Paddy Pimblett is the coming man, right? He's on the rise. He's dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. He's all charismatic. He's like the next McGregor combined with Islam Makhachev. We know this isn't true. Does Michael Chandler know it isn't true? Michael Chandler had the UFC suggest to him that he should speak for Black History Month, and he was like, good idea.
Yeah.
You know, this is not an expert game planner. This is not a great thinker we're talking about here.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, he definitely could just kind of idiot his way out of winning this fight. That is 100%.
Yeah. He might outsmart
possible.
The only man he is capable of outsmarting, himself.
And the thing is Pimblett, especially at this stage in his career, like we said, it does seem like he knows what he's good at and what he wants to do, and he's a little bit more of a sure bet in terms of what he's actually going to try and do. Now we know that what he in most phases, what he tries to do is terrible, yes. But at least he's like a known variable a little bit more, where Michael Chandler is kind of a wild card here for sure.
Yeah. I still cannot help but pick Michael Chandler. Like this,
I cannot pick Paddy Pimblett against Michael Chandler.
The track's got to run out at some point for Paddy Pimblett. Like he has now finally graduated to, and it's still, as far as like top matchups go, he's still catching a guy way past his best.
Yeah, but the difference is, well, he has been given people that he can grapple is the most important thing. At the end of the day, even when Tony Ferguson was having some success, striking with him and jabbing him and landing on him, as everybody is going to do against Pimblett, when he could get on top of Tony Ferguson, he could do damage, he could get to strong positions, and he could take him down. And Chandler is not easy to get down or hold down, and he's not easy to submit or to damage from top position either. It's hard to keep somebody like that who's so athletic and so explosive down for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And you even really good people like Charles Oliveira, who is a treat to watch from top position. Mm-hmm. They end up having to spend so much energy and so much time just maintaining position that they don't get a ton done from top position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to check Tapology here, just to make certain this is not one of those random 5-round co-main events, because that might considerably change things here. It is, in fact, a 5-round co-main event.
That's why. Why?
Well, why do we need to see 5 rounds of this? Come on.
You know what that means is that definitely means that Chandler is going to wait.
I mean, that would be so funny if he did that again.
And then just like, oh man.
Talk about the mind of an MMA fighter.
We talked about all the different ways that Volkanovski could beat Lopes because he's got so many different options tactically and strategically. And Chandler has so many different options to lose, like many different ways to fuck it up.
He is eminently capable of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, isn't he?
Yeah. But this would be by far the worst fighter he's ever lost to, right?
Oh, by far, yeah.
Like so far below anybody that he's lost to. And, even in the fights that he has lost, and, he's lost 4 of his last 5 with the only one that was a win coming against Tony Ferguson, which he got hurt in, and that's the ancient, decrepit Tony Ferguson. But, it's Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje, and those fights were all pretty great. Like, he had Justin Gaethje hurt multiple times. He had Charles Oliveira obviously hurt in both of their fights. Mm-hmm. He's so dangerous even in these fights. And he had Dustin Poirier hurt, as well. And it took some really clever pocket boxing from Poirier to be able to...
he was relatively close to beating Dustin Poirier, actually.
Yeah. So you just have to imagine, like, if he gets those bursts in against Pimblett, it's either going to be that Pimblett is able to... you know what? I can't even outline a way. I cannot. Pimblett is terrible. I can't even bring myself to say that this is how he's going to do it. He's just going to get KO'd in the first round, right? Like, it just...
Yeah. But if he doesn't,
They don't get KO'd in the 5th.
Look, if he doesn't, something really stupid is going to happen after that. Something really stupid. Michael Chandler is going to take him down and then get reversed or something. You know what I mean? Like,
and gouge his eyeballs and get DQ'd.
Yeah. This would be a sweet occasion for Michael Chandler to get his first DQ loss, I gotta say. But it's, the first round seems so dangerous for Paddy Pimblett, but the flip side of that is that Michael Chandler is a goddamn mess after that first round. Because then he's suddenly put into a fight where he doesn't have the shocking speed, his power is a little diminished, and he becomes just a short man with no range game and no defensive skill whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't know. Though still, it would...
Who puts himself in bad positions, too, because he's like, when he does go, he goes 120% no matter what.
That's true, yeah.
So it's just...
he's getting easier to take down as well, and like one of the takedowns that Oliveira hit on him, at least one of them, like he shot from way outside, you know, and it wasn't like Oliveira's usual, like very surprisingly fast level change to a body lock that he can get all the time on people. Oliveira shot from really far outside and kind of hit like a knee tap as Chandler was trying to wrench him up with the underhook. This is in the second round.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if he's just getting worse as a defensive wrestler too, which it seems like that's probably the case. Mm-hmm. And then even if he's a little bit difficult you have to spend a lot of energy keeping him down just because of his athleticism and stuff. And he still is not like technically a good BJJ bottom player or anything like that. And so, and he got submitted by Dustin Poirier, like making stupid mistakes in the grappling department. So I don't know. I guess this is me reverting on I can see a way for Pimblett to win. I guess I can see it, you know. It's just his wrestling is so bad. And he doesn't have any threat on the feet if Chandler is not an idiot. So there's nothing there to respect. But like what you just said, he will respect what Pimblett does just because he's going to be stupid and be like, wow, this guy is big and powerful.
Yeah.
Did you see the way he hurt Tony Ferguson, you know? And he's going to like back up if Pimblett decides to come forward, and then he's probably going to get taken down.
Michael Chandler is a dude who gets up every morning and goes and lays on the driveway to get energy from the morning sun. He is operating on 100% reptile brain.
Yeah.
He is not a thinker at all.
Still picking him. I'm still picking him, but I just have to say, like, he'd better knock Pimblett out quickly. Because if he doesn't, he just gets worse as the fight goes on. So does Pimblett. Yeah, but so does Pimblett. Pimblett, gets worse too. And like Ken Pimblett, the guy who balloons up to like 500 pounds in between fights.
I don't think he did that this time, actually. He looked pretty svelte a few, like 4 weeks ago even, or even before that, when I saw him out of camp between fights. So maybe he's got that under control, but it is true.
Either way, I don't think he can do what Charles Oliveira did, which is like out-grapple Chandler for 4 rounds.
No. He was heaving
and then
for
survive
breath
a late scare
at the end of that Tony Ferguson fight.
Yeah.
Like Chandler may genuinely have significantly better cardio than Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah, and that's why it's like, okay, so he has to really worry about early the rounds against Chandler, and he probably will need to finish Chandler, which was something obviously that Oliveira was not able to do despite having all of those amazing positions for the better part of 4 rounds. And I guess it's just really hard to see how that happens. Although, you know, you don't want to MMA math it too much, and Chandler will certainly find a way to lose. even though I'm not gonna pick Pimblett, I'm just like fully expecting something really stupid from Chandler.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Wow, what a co-main event, huh?
All right. The fight you love to break down. You know, like so much technical intrigue to talk about.
This is one for the experts, isn't it? Okay. Well, let's take another break there. When we come back, Bryce Mitchell is similarly doomed. They've matched him with another terrifying puncher, and maybe we'll touch on some other fights from this undercard after that, but certainly Mitchell versus Silva after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back, folks. Let's talk about these featherweights. Bryce Mitchell, Jean Silva, Long Jean Silva, that is. And it does, far be it from me to feel pity for the man who said that he thinks Hitler was actually pretty cool. But I do feel, unlike Bryce Mitchell, I'm still a human being. And I'm seeing what's happening here. And I gotta think a little more brain trauma is not gonna help Bryce Mitchell's point of view,
Yeah.
It's not gonna make things better for anybody except for the small surge of vicarious pleasure that we get from seeing him slept, if that is indeed what happens. And it seems very likely. In fact, it seems like the point of the matchup almost. If anybody made this matchup with any point in mind at all, which is a huge question in the modern UFC, but the dude just got crushed by Josh Emmett in 2 minutes. And now they're putting him in there against genuinely featherweight Yoel Romero.
No, don't forget the Kron Gracie fight.
Oh, yeah.
That was important.
So the thing is the margins feel thin. Bryce Mitchell he's not a great athlete, full stop. He does not enjoy the same kind of command over his opponents on the feet that he does on the ground.
Right.
And he tries to make up for that with, aggression. And it's not stupid aggression. Bryce Mitchell is actually a pretty thoughtful striker. He's got a lot of ideas. He's pretty adaptable, decent counterpuncher, punches the body, throws in combination. But he simply does not have the ability to make a fight on the feet one-way traffic, unless he has fully broken the opponent by that point. And so matchups like this are always going to be incredibly volatile and dangerous for him.
Yeah, I mean, the matchup on the feet is incredibly concerning. Jean Silva is an incredible counterpuncher. He's also quite good in the clinch and in sort of collision scenarios, as he did routinely to Drew Dober. He was running him into elbows, and really an astute counterpuncher, and he has a keen eye for tactical openings as well, and he hits really hard as well. And yeah, Bryce Mitchell is a bit more of a mess on the feet, and he doesn't really know how to put it together and to close people down. And he's gonna be even more wary against somebody like Jean Silva. So I just don't actually, on the feet, it seems pretty dire. And you mentioned at the top, this is probably why they made the matchup, if there's any thought put into it at all. And as I said before, I don't care to see Bryce Mitchell ever fight again. Yeah. Any reasonable sports organization would have been like, we're done writing checks to you.
No, instead they're giving him a slap on the wrist for saying the quiet part out loud.
I mean, it's not even a slap on the wrist. They're like, hey, how about we give you a main card slot on a pay-per-view and use your abhorrent views to promote fights?
Would you like $80,000 or whatever the fuck Bryce Mitchell makes?
Exactly.
In reward for that horrific thing that you said. You might get knocked out.
I guess the interesting thing is what's Jean Silva's defensive grappling? He actually has not fought a ton of people that really wanted to take him down. His camp generally has been decent at preparing people for that, but as far as I can remember, even Charles Jourdain was having a little bit of success there, right?
Jourdain got him down in the first round. Jean Silva backed him up to the fence. Jourdain shot a not particularly good looking double leg takedown, and Jean Silva immediately attempted to guillotine him and got taken down for it.
Yeah, because as awesome as Silva is too, he does like to plant and counter.
Mm-hmm.
He also, he likes to really land something flashy from time to time too. He likes to lean back a lot, make people miss, and then come back. And I don't know. There is an avenue there where Bryce Mitchell could throw out a kick and get him, leaning back, and then just shoot in on his legs and take him down.
Bryce Mitchell is actually quite a good takedown artist.
Yeah. I mean, he took down Topuria, and he's got a surprisingly fast shot, and then he's pretty relentless with it too. I mean, technically he's not the best wrestler, but he makes it work.
He's got good timing. He has a variety of finishes that he can go to, and it helps that when he gets a takedown, tends to secure the position. Doesn't take him having to rinse and repeat too many times against most fighters. And yeah, that is a serious cause for concern for Jean Silva. He may have that Yoel Romero cheat code where he just has an unfair sense of timing and distance that most athletes do not have access to. But, Yoel Romero was both a very good fighter and a very bad one at the same time. Huge holes in that man's game that were just kind of, somewhat successfully papered over by his physical abilities and his willingness to have a stinker until one of those physical abilities could save him.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
yeah,
I guess it's just, in that sense, if he is in sort of that Yoel Romero archetype, which he is a little bit, you definitely get the sense that it's hard to predict this fight, a little bit harder than it might seem like at first if you just kind of sense the momentum of these guys. And Jean Silva certainly has a lot of that going for him right now. But in actuality, it's I could almost just as easily see him absolutely deading Bryce Mitchell in one of those collision moments when Bryce Mitchell's kind of trying to close the distance, Charles Jourdain did in the first round of that fight. He ran right into a big left hook, another really awesome weapon of Jean Silva's.
Mm-hmm.
That could definitely happen. But then at the same time, it's I could see him getting taken down, and then he is generally very urgent to get back to his feet, which you like to see, but also that tends to leave your back exposed.
Yeah.
And Bryce Mitchell's a competent back taker, and
he's competent
there's
over
an
on
avenue
the ground.
there.
It's a different kind of ground game. It is a Bryce Mitchell before he revealed himself to be the shithead that he is. Fully. I mean, he'd already put a screwdriver through his ball sack at this point, so maybe there were some signs that he's a fucking dunce. But
he's like a prodigy of stupidity.
Yeah, he's just a pioneer. But back in the day, I was I would kind of like to see Bryce Mitchell succeed in this division. He's got a really interesting game, and he has just conceptually, a rock solid approach to the ground for this sport. He really is I don't know if this is the case anymore, but at the time when Bryce Mitchell was starting to make a name for himself in the UFC, his top game felt very cutting edge. He is, like many fighters now, one of these guys who figured out, perhaps himself, that it's really good to sit in halfway transitional positions, the 3/4 mount game. And it's the same kind of stuff we saw from Sean Brady against Leon Edwards. Compare that matchup to what we saw from Pat Sabatini last weekend. Sabatini's a great top grappler as well, a great all-round grappler. But Sabatini's corner was shouting at him in that fight hey, maybe let him make a mistake. And Sabatini couldn't do it. He had to be in complete control, and it's impressive he was able to do it, even if Joanderson Brito is terrible off of his back. Right. He just kept him restricted entirely the whole time. Sean Brady, on the other hand, feels more like what Bryce Mitchell does. because he went in there with Leon Edwards, and instead of giving him no options, he gave him 2 bad options in many different positions. Like, okay, either give up your back or give me the pass. I'm offering you a threat, and I'm giving you a limited range of movement. Like, that's the soul of the Khabib grappling game, right?
Yep, for sure. The pick your poison. You can go this way. Shavkat does the same thing. You can choose one of 2 super dangerous positions, and combining the threat of submissions with actual damaging ground and pound as well.
Some impetus to make one of those decisions. You can't just wait these guys out because they're in a position where they can do damage and worry you and bother you. And if you do nothing, you will either get knocked out or simply lose a decision. And so you have to pick your poison. And they know exactly what the 2 options are available to you, and they are ready for it. And Bryce Mitchell is one of these grapplers. Bryce Mitchell is not going to be surprised when John Silva tries to wrap his head in hip heist and gives his back trying to get back to his feet. He will be ready for that to happen on the ground. And it might be a opportunity for a quick finish for him. I do not think John Silva's performance against Charles Jourdain inspires a lot of confidence in his wrestling game. You know? And hitting quick get-ups on Charles Jourdain, there's a lot more opportunity to do that against that kind of fighter than there is somebody with Bryce Mitchell's approach to grappling.
Yeah, I mean, and even Ige, who is similarly capable of getting up when he gets taken down, and a very dogged takedown defender, really hard to just control and overwhelm. Mm-hmm. Even he can be athletically overwhelmed, but just technically, he tends to make a lot of the right decisions when somebody's trying to grapple him. Mm-hmm. Mitchell was able to get him down, hold him down, take good positions, get mount, get the back, those types of things, land, ground, and pound. And the main thing is that it's just that doggedness and that willingness to keep trying and keep going for it. He does wear down people, and obviously it's hard when somebody like John Silva is not the most proactive striker, for sure.
Yeah.
A little bit more waiting for people to do things. If somebody is, as long as Bryce Mitchell doesn't essentially fall into a
walk
bit
into
of
it.
Yeah, if he's not scared off by the power so much that he doesn't want to do too many things and he's waiting for the perfect opportunity, that will paradoxically just put him in danger more often. If he's willing to just keep making John Silva work, and John Silva will get back up, and then Bryce Mitchell can just kind of get right back in and be undeterred by that, then I think he could have that sort of similar success he did against Ige. But even in that fight, it wasn't easy, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It does feel, I suppose, a little bit like the last matchup. There's maybe a little more flexibility for Jean Silva because he has that tactical adjustment ability that Michael Chandler very much lacks.
Right.
But to allow Bryce Mitchell to settle into this fight too much, there's just a lot of connectivity in Bryce Mitchell's game. If you allow him to get work in on the feet and you don't punish him and scare him off or hurt him, that is going to set up like a single leg entry.
Yeah, he has that just throw his rear hand, dip down straight onto the single, type of moves. Like you're talking about, there's connectivity there. There's actual takedown setups from his striking. As janky as all of his mechanics look a lot of the time, it works because it's MMA, and there's lots of things that you have to worry about in a fight. And
he's capable of playing off of that on the feet, too, if you let him. If you become wary of the takedown, he can put together some pretty nice combinations and punish you with the strikes themselves, which then reestablishes the threat of the striking that makes the next takedown setup work. He does have a very cohesive game. He's just has thinner margins than other people at this level. Bryce Mitchell is genuinely somebody who's principles, not as a person, but as a fighter, obviously, and his technique are the reason he's at this level. Much more than his physicality. He actually still stands apart from most ranked fighters in the whole UFC for that reason. And it goes to show how conceptually solid his whole game is. And
yeah, but it's also the reason why you have to say, like,
yeah,
well, what did it look like when Mitchell took a step up in athleticism?
Right. And he
fought Josh Emmett, right?
He started to get fucking pasted. Yeah. Or Ilya Tuporia. Even if he got his chances in that fight, still, like, you can see.
Generally, he was getting pasted.
There's a difference. Sure. There's a difference in level here. And John Silva certainly feels like that level of physical talent. He just may be dysfunctional enough that Mitchell still has a chance to win here.
Yeah. And I can see it more clearly than I can see, Lopes or Pimblett's path to victory. This seems like a bit more of a clear one, especially given that Charles Jourdain fight. And I think John Silva still is a bit underproved as a defensive grappler. And we just don't really know. And in that sense, it's like, well, maybe this is kind of a good matchup for him at this stage. Mitchell is a winnable style matchup athletically, but is hopefully we actually get to see John Silva tested in that, because he's going to have to show that he could hang there if he's like going to fight somebody like Evloev or something like that. Like, that feels like it would be a bridge too far at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For John Silva.
Yeah. And Mitchell is just not a guy that, in some ways he's a beautiful matchup for John Silva. I mean, look what happened the last time he faced a big puncher. In other ways, because Bryce Mitchell's game is like so generally just kind of professionally conducted.
Yeah.
John Silva is the opposite. He's much closer conceptually to the Diego Lopes side of things. He's just operating, I think, at an even higher level physically relative to your average ranked MMA fighter.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of empty space. There's a lot of just kind of waiting and seeing. And that only works because he has like supernaturally good timing, and it's deadly when he just guesses right even once.
Yeah.
But
I wonder too, like,
it's not a good game. It's not a good game. That's the problem.
Right. And he could be developing still too. He could develop into a little bit more proactive of a fighter. And proactive doesn't mean that he has to be a pressure fighter. We don't really get this archetype too much in MMA, but in actual boxing, when you have like real counterpunchers, they are not, just sitting around and waiting for people to do stuff.
No, they're constantly active. They're feeding you feints. They're working with their jab. They're, throwing punches away. They're not just testing your reactions, but like giving you stuff that you have to react to.
Yeah, they're guiding you into the things that they want you to do so that they can then punish those.
Counterpunchers also control the initiative. When it's done right, they also seek to control the initiative. It's just a more subtle way of doing it, right? If a guy's
and we're not seeing that out of John Silva yet, at this point.
Yet.
But that's something that he could definitely get a sense for over time. And if he does, he could be a really great fighter. And I really want to see that archetype in MMA, because I think that MMA is always going to be a little bit more biased towards pressure fighters, just because I think, well, part of it is the cage and the amount of space that they have, and then part of it is the just the number of offensive options you have, making counter fighting difficult. Especially as people get more well rounded, it's just hard when there's so many different things somebody can be doing on the offense to have responses for everything. So, but I would like to see people get better at that, and those archetypes to be there at the top. So I'm sort of rooting for him to make that development, but I'm not sort of seeing it yet for him.
We've not
and
seen
this
it
will
yet.
be. This will at least be a good fight because, like we said, Bryce Mitchell puts things together between his striking and his grappling. And so we'll be able to see if John Silva can look as venomous as he usually does on the counter when he has multiple threats.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And he did, to his credit, he did look just as venomous against Charles Jourdain. It's just that there were holes in it, as there always are going to be when somebody's presenting lots of different offensive
and he got away with some stuff. It seems not as easy to get away with against a guy like Mitchell.
Yeah.
And
the mental aspect of it is interesting, because I wonder, because Mitchell was a lot less comfortable in, the 2 minutes that he had with Emmett.
Yeah.
And is it the immense power that was solely responsible for his discomfort, or was it that also Emmett is incredibly hard to take down? And I wonder if he will feel as stressed out if John Silva doesn't have the combination of those two. Yes, he hits really hard, and he can knock you out. But if Mitchell doesn't feel like he's going to get immediately shut out if he shoots on him, then maybe he won't feel so uncomfortable.
I mean, shit, likewise against Ige and Topuria to a certain extent. Like, these are strong defensive wrestlers and very good grapplers as well. So there's not just like you don't get that wonderful feeling that the striking is the part I hate. It's the scariest, most anxiety-inducing part, but it always leads to safety if I do it correctly. That's a good feeling to have if you're Bryce Mitchell, that you don't really have access to against that level of fighter, who is not only that good of an athlete as those three tough matchups I just named were, but specifically good against the thing you're best at.
Yeah.
And so it seems like a very losable matchup for Bryce Mitchell, but also maybe a reminder that he's actually pretty good. He's a well put together fighter.
Who I never want to see fight against.
No. For that reason, I'm picking Jean Silva by first round KO.
Yeah.
Official time 3 seconds. But yeah, I think it could very easily go haywire for him. So I suppose from that level, it is a well-made fight, but Jesus Christ. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for UFC 314. Miguel, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I don't know why I'm sounding so sarcastic when I'm trying to be sincere here. I'm afraid of being emotionally vulnerable, but I really appreciate you stepping in on Dan Ige style short notice to fill in for Phil here.
Yeah, hopefully I did a better job than Ige has on his short notice fights. But...
Oh, certainly. Yeah. You didn't really bring the heat until like round 2.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But that's still earlier than Ige managed against Lopes, certainly. You can be found on Twitter, where you very regularly post a lot of very instructive GIFs and clips from fights with little bits of breakdown in them.
You know, very regularly is only relative to you, though.
Oh, my God. You're a fucking workhorse as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, to just, take the fucking compliment, Miguel. Jesus Christ. The guy's busy, all right? He puts out a lot of good work on a very consistent basis. Whatever he says, he apparently has impossibly high standards. But if you're a Heavy Hands listener, you will be amazed at the consistency with which this man puts out interesting analysis. And you can find that, I believe it is at Miguel Class.
Yeah, that's on Twitter, yep.
MIGCLASS. Of course, if you have not tuned in, Miguel and I have been doing Heavy Henka on the Heavy Hands Patreon. Every 2 months, we sit down for 2 episodes when we will talk about the first 7 days and then the final 8 days of a 15-day grand sumo tournament. And that has been a great time. This last one was no exception. And I think that'll do it. Oh, if you haven't seen it already, you can head over to facepunching.substack.com. I wrote a little piece about Steve Erceg lamenting the circumstances that have basically prevented him from becoming the fighter that it seems like he should become, which also devolves into a rant at the end where I'm calling for Dana, Sean, and Mick to be banished and forced out of the country, and not only just the UFC. So you can check that out. I'll try to get another piece out for UFC 314 this week, and I do still intend to come up with something to celebrate the life of George Foreman. There's a lot of footage to trawl through and a lot of potential topics to discuss, but I'm going to try to do that this month sometime. Do a little George Foreman write-up. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.